All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrison. I watched Diane's perfectly manicured hand freeze on her designer purse. Her son Kyle shifted in his seat, that smug grin finally faltering. They had no idea what was coming. Your Honor. Thomas stood, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Before we proceed, I have evidence that will fundamentally change this case. Diane's lawyer started to object, but Judge Harrison raised his hand. I'll allow it. Mr. Chen, you may approach. As Thomas walked toward the bench with a manila folder, I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. 63 years old, and this was the biggest gamble of my life. Everything I had left, my father's memory, my home, my dignity, hung on what was in that folder. Let me back up. 3 months ago, I was a different person. 3 months ago, I was Margaret Thompson, retired high school English teacher, recent widow, devoted daughter. I lived in a modest townhouse in Arlington, visited my father every Sunday, and spent my evenings grading papers for the tutoring center where I volunteered. My biggest worry was whether Dad was taking his blood pressure medication. Dad. Robert Mitchell. 85 years old, sharp as a tack, stubborn as a mule. He'd built Mitchell and Associates from nothing, a construction supply business that grew into a small empire across Northern Virginia. After Mom died 15 years ago, I thought he'd never remarry. I was wrong. Diane showed up 5 years ago at Dad's country club, 48 years old, blonde, beautiful, with a sob story about her abusive ex-husband and her struggling son. Dad, lonely and aging, fell hard. They married 6 months later. I tried to be happy for him. I really did. I smiled at the wedding, welcomed Diane into our family, even helped Kyle, her 28-year-old son, get a job interview at a friend's firm. He showed up hungover and didn't get the position. Your daughter doesn't like me, Diane would tell Dad, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Margaret's just protective, Dad would say, squeezing my hand. Give it time. So I gave it time. 5 years of biting my tongue while Diane redecorated Dad's house, our family home, erasing every trace of my mother. 5 years of watching Kyle move in and out, never holding a job for more than 3 months. 5 years of Sunday dinners where Diane would make little comments. Margaret, honey, have you thought about Botox? It works wonders. Still volunteering? That's sweet. Must be nice not needing the money. Robert, tell Margaret about the cruise we're planning. Oh, wait. It's just for 2. You understand, don't you, Margaret? Dad didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to see it. Then came October 15th, a Tuesday. I was at the tutoring center when my phone rang. Is this Margaret Thompson? Speaking. This is Fairfax Hospital. Your father, Robert Mitchell, was brought in by ambulance. He's had a massive heart attack. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember parking. I just remember running through those automatic doors, my sensible teacher flats slapping against the linoleum, my reading glasses bouncing on their chain. Robert Mitchell, where is he? The nurse's face told me everything before her mouth did. I'm so sorry. They did everything they could. But, no. The word came out strangled. No, he can't be. I just saw him Sunday. We had pot roast. He told me about his new project with the Masonic Lodge. He was fine. The doctor can explain. Where is he? My voice cracked. I need to see him. They let me sit with him for an hour. Dad looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. I held his weathered hand, the one that had taught me to ride a bike, that had walked me down the aisle when I married Tom, that had held me when Tom died 3 years ago. I'm not ready, Daddy, I whispered. I'm not ready to be an orphan. But ready or not, he was gone. Diane arrived 20 minutes after I did, red-eyed and dramatic, Kyle trailing behind her looking bored. She threw herself across Dad's body, wailing. Robert! No, not my Robert! I stepped back, numb. She'd known him 5 years. I'd known him 63, but grief isn't a competition. The funeral was a blur. Diane insisted on handling everything. The service, the flowers, the reception. I let her. I was too broken to fight. You just focus on yourself, Margaret, she said, patting my hand. I'll take care of everything. It's what Robert would have wanted. The day after the funeral, Dad's lawyer, Peter Morrison, called us both to his office for the will reading. Peter had handled Dad's legal affairs for 30 years. I'd known him since I was a child. Thank you both for coming, Peter said, settling behind his desk. He looked uncomfortable, kept adjusting his glasses. Robert's will is straightforward. He updated it 2 months ago. 2 months ago. After he'd seemed distracted at Sunday dinner, claiming he had paperwork to handle, Peter cleared his throat and began reading. I, Robert Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate to my beloved wife, Diane Mitchell. The room tilted. What? The house at 247 Oakmont Drive, all financial assets, investment accounts, and business interests in Mitchell and Associates go to Diane Mitchell. That can't be right. My voice sounded far away. Peter, that's not Dad, wouldn't. I'm sorry, Margaret. Peter's hands shook slightly as he held the document. It's all here, signed and notarized, dated September 3rd. Diane made a soft sound, pressing her hand to her mouth. Oh, Robert, you were too generous. I stared at her perfect makeup, at the Chanel suit I now realized came from Dad's money, at the crocodile tears that weren't quite reaching her eyes. Can I see it? I asked. Peter hesitated, then slid the papers across. I scanned the document, my teacher's eye catching every detail. The language was formal, legal, and there, at the bottom, was Dad's signature. Except something was wrong. Dad always signed his name with a distinctive flourish on the M in Mitchell. He'd been signing documents that way for 50 years. I'd seen hundreds of his signatures. This one was close, but the flourish was different. Smaller, hesitant. Peter, this signature is legally binding, he interrupted, not meeting my eyes. I'm sorry, Margaret. I know this isn't what you expected. I looked at him sharply. Peter had been Dad's friend. They'd golf together every month. Why wouldn't he look at me? When did Dad come in to sign this? I wasn't here that day. My assistant handled it. Your assistant? For something this important? Robert insisted it be done quickly. He said he wanted everything settled. Peter finally met my eyes, and I saw something there. Sadness, guilt. I'm sorry, Margaret. My hands are tied. Diane stood, smoothing her skirt. This is so overwhelming. Peter, when can we begin the probate process? I want to honor Robert's wishes as quickly as possible. We can start immediately. The house and assets should transfer within a few weeks. A few weeks. In a few weeks, I'd have nothing. No inheritance, no family home to visit, nothing but my teacher's pension and my small townhouse. Dad had been worth over $1 million. He'd always told me, "Don't worry, honey. You'll be taken care of." I stood on shaking legs. I need air. Outside Peter's office, I sat in my car and cried. Not delicate tears, ugly, gasping sobs that made my whole body shake. I was 63 years old, grieving my father, and I'd just been cut out of his will entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. We should talk about clearing out Robert's things. How's this weekend? This weekend. 5 days after the funeral, and she wanted me to help box up my childhood. I didn't respond. That weekend, I drove to Dad's house, the house where I'd grown up, where Mom had taught me to bake cookies, where Dad had helped me with my math homework at the kitchen table, the house that was now Diane's. I used my key, I still had a key, and walked in. The living room was already transformed. Mom's antique furniture was gone. The family photos had been replaced with modern art. In their place was a massive new television and white leather furniture. Margaret! Diane appeared from the kitchen, Kyle behind her. I didn't expect you today. I came to get some of Mom's things, the photo albums, her jewelry box. Diane's smile tightened. Oh, honey, I've been going through everything. Some items have already been donated. Robert would have wanted. Donated? My voice rose. My mother's jewelry? Her photos? Margaret, you're being emotional. This is my house now, and I need to make it my own. Robert understood that. Kyle smirked from the doorway, eating cereal from a bowl at 2 p.m. I want my mother's wedding ring, I said quietly. Dad kept it in his safe. The safe? Diane laughed. Honey, I changed the combination. Security reasons. But don't worry, everything inside is being properly inventoried for estate purposes. She was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes shifted left, in the way she touched her neck. She'd already taken what she wanted. You need to leave now, Diane said, her voice hardening. You're trespassing. Trespassing? This is my father's house. Was your father's house? Now it's mine. Kyle, show her out. Kyle stepped forward, still holding his cereal bowl. 6'2" of entitled mediocrity. I left. What choice did I have? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Dad's signature on that will. The wrong flourish. The hesitant pen strokes. At 2 a.m., I got up and dug through my desk drawer until I found what I was looking for, my father's birthday card from last year. He'd written a long message inside, telling me how proud he was of me, how much he loved me. I held it next to a photo of the will signature I'd sneakily taken with my phone in Peter's office. They weren't the same. The birthday card had Dad's characteristic bold flourish. The will signature was timid, uncertain, different. I wasn't crazy. That signature was forged. But what could I do? I was a retired teacher on a fixed income. I couldn't afford to hire a lawyer to challenge the will. Diane had Dad's entire estate. She could drag this out in court for years, bleed me dry with legal fees. I sat at my kitchen table, feeling more alone than I had since Tom died. Then I remembered Thomas. Thomas Chen, my late husband's nephew. He'd gone to law school at Georgetown, now worked at a mid-size firm in D.C. We'd stayed in touch after Tom passed. He'd call every few months to check on me, send flowers on Tom's birthday. I hesitated. Thomas was busy, important. Why would he help me with this mess? But I had no one else. I called him the next morning. Aunt Margaret? He sounded surprised. Is everything okay? I told him everything. About Dad's death, the will, the signature, Diane kicking me out. My voice broke halfway through, but I pushed on. When I finished, there was a long silence. Aunt Margaret, Thomas said finally, do you still have that birthday card? Yes. Don't let it out of your sight. I'm coming over tonight. Thomas arrived at 7, carrying his briefcase and a bag of Chinese takeout. You need to eat, he said, setting out containers on my small kitchen table. When's the last time you had a real meal? I couldn't remember. We ate in silence for a few minutes, then Thomas pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything again. Every detail. Every conversation. So I did. This time, he took notes, asked questions, wanted exact dates, times, witnesses. Peter Morrison acting strange. That's important. Dad's old friend wouldn't normally delegate a will signing. But what can we do? Diane has all the money for lawyers. I can't afford— You're not paying me, Thomas interrupted. Uncle Tom was the best man I knew. He'd want me to help you. Thomas, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He looked at me seriously. Aunt Margaret, if this signature is forged, that's fraud. Criminal fraud. We need to prove it. Over the next 3 weeks, Thomas worked like a man possessed. He got the will from probate court, hired a forensic handwriting expert, tracked down Dad's actual signature on dozens of documents. The expert's report came back on a Wednesday. In my professional opinion, the signature on the will dated September 3rd is a forgery. The pressure points, letter spacing, and characteristic flourishes do not match the exemplar signatures of Robert Mitchell. We have evidence of forgery, Thomas said, barely containing his excitement. But we need more. We need to prove Diane did it. How? We need to talk to Peter Morrison. Privately. Thomas called Peter and arranged a meeting at a coffee shop, away from his office. Peter showed up looking 10 years older than he had at the will reading. Peter, Thomas began gently, we know the signature is forged. We have an expert report. What we don't know is how Diane got you involved. Peter's coffee cup shook in his hands. I wasn't involved. I swear. Then tell us what happened. It took him 20 minutes, but Peter finally broke down. Diane had come to his office in August, saying Robert wanted to update his will but was too busy to come in person. She had a new will already typed up. All she needed was Peter's notary assistant to witness the signature. I should have insisted on seeing Robert in person, Peter said, his voice cracking. But Diane was so convincing. She said Robert was embarrassed about cutting Margaret out, didn't want to face me. She offered my assistant $5,000 to notarize without asking questions. And your assistant took it? Peter nodded miserably. She quit 2 weeks ago, moved to Florida. I think Diane paid her to disappear. Why didn't you say something? I was scared. Diane threatened me, said if I told anyone, she'd claim I was in on it, that I'd lose my license. I've been a lawyer for 35 years, Margaret. I have 3 years until retirement. I couldn't. He stopped, looking at me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Robert was my friend. I wanted to be angry, but I just felt tired. Will you testify? Yes. God, yes. I'll tell them everything. With Peter's testimony and the handwriting analysis, Thomas filed a motion to invalidate the will. But he didn't stop there. We need to show a pattern, he explained. One forged will could be a mistake. But if we can prove Diane has done this before, Thomas hired a private investigator. Within a week, we had our answer. Diane's abusive ex-husband didn't exist. She'd never been married before Dad, but she had been engaged 3 times, always to wealthy older men. Each engagement had ended with accusations of theft or fraud, but no charges were ever filed. The men had paid her to go away quietly. And Kyle? His real name was Kenneth Dalton Jr. He had a criminal record in Florida for check fraud. Thomas compiled everything into a binder 3 inches thick. Then he requested an emergency hearing to halt the probate process, which brought us to today, to this courtroom, to Diane's face going pale as Thomas approached the bench. Judge Harrison reviewed the documents Thomas handed him, his expression growing darker with each page. Mrs. Mitchell, he said finally, these are serious allegations. Diane stood, smoothing her designer suit. Your Honor, this is my stepdaughter grasping at straws. She's upset about her father's will, and this is a forensic handwriting analysis from Dr. Patricia Woods, one of the most respected experts in her field, the judge interrupted. She concludes the signature is forged. Anyone can forge a report. We also have testimony from Peter Morrison, the notary who witnessed the will signing, stating that he never met with Robert Mitchell in person and that you paid his assistant to falsify the notarization. Diane's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client, and, the judge continued, evidence that Mrs. Mitchell has a pattern of targeting wealthy older men, including engagement fraud in 3 previous cases, and that her son has a criminal record under a different name. The courtroom was silent. Based on this evidence, I am immediately invalidating the will dated September 3rd and ordering a full criminal investigation into Mrs. Mitchell's finances and activities. Judge Harrison looked at Diane with cold eyes. Bailiff, please take Mrs. Mitchell into custody pending investigation. What? No. 2 officers approached. Diane's face crumbled, the pretty mask finally slipping to show the calculation underneath. This is her fault, she pointed at me. That bitter old woman. Robert didn't want her to have anything. He told me she was ungrateful, that, Mrs. Mitchell, you have the right to remain silent, one officer said, putting handcuffs on her wrists. Kyle tried to bolt from his seat, but another officer was ready. Kenneth Dalton Jr., you're also being detained for questioning regarding fraud and conspiracy. Mom! Kyle's voice cracked, suddenly sounding much younger than 28. They led them both out. Diane was still protesting, still claiming this was all a misunderstanding. Kyle just looked terrified. I sat frozen in my seat, unable to process what had just happened. Thomas sat down beside me, putting a gentle hand on my shoulder. Aunt Margaret, are you okay? I don't know, I said honestly. Is it really over? Not quite. We still need to probate Dad's actual will, the one from 2019, before he married Diane. But yes, the hard part is over. The 2019 will was found in Dad's safety deposit box, a box Diane hadn't known about. Peter retrieved it personally, his hands shaking as he opened it in front of Thomas, me, and a bank manager. This will was different. Dad's real signature was bold and clear, the flourish on the M unmistakable. And the contents: I leave 75% of my estate to my beloved daughter, Margaret Thompson, who has been my rock through every storm. The remaining 25% is to be divided equally between my favorite charities, the Masonic Lodge Building Fund and the Arlington Public Library. No mention of Diane. Because in 2019, Dad had still been clear-headed enough to protect his assets. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings. Diane and Kyle were formally charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The investigation revealed that Diane had already transferred $200,000 of Dad's money to offshore accounts, planning to disappear once the house sold. She took a plea deal. 5 years in prison in exchange for testimony against Kyle and returning the stolen money. Kyle got 3 years. The house returned to Dad's estate, which meant it came to me. I spent a weekend there with Thomas's help, sorting through everything Diane had touched. We found Mom's jewelry box hidden in the back of a closet. The wedding ring was still inside, wrapped in tissue paper. I cried when I held it, remembering how Mom used to twist it on her finger when she was thinking. We found photo albums Diane had donated. They were actually in the garage, waiting to be thrown out. Pictures of me as a baby, my parents on their wedding day, family Christmases spanning decades. And in Dad's home office, in a locked drawer Thomas had to break open, we found a letter. It was dated August 15th, a month before the fake will was signed, addressed to me. My dearest Margaret, it began in Dad's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I need you to know some things I didn't say while I was alive. I made a mistake marrying Diane. I see that now. I was lonely after your mother died, and Diane made me feel young again. But lately, I've seen the truth. The way she looks at my checkbook, the way Kyle expects me to fund his laziness, the little lies that don't quite add up. I went to Peter last week to make sure my will is airtight. Everything goes to you, honey. The house, the business, the savings. You're the only family that matters. I know Diane won't go quietly. She's already asking about my finances, about what happens if something happens to me. I'm going to tell her I'm leaving everything to charity, just to see how she reacts. If she tries anything, fight her. Don't let her take what's yours. You're stronger than you think, Margaret. You got that from your mother. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I didn't see Diane for what she was sooner. Love, Dad. P.S. Remember what I always told you. The truth always comes out. Sometimes it just needs help. I sat on the floor of Dad's office, holding that letter, and finally let myself grieve properly. Not just for losing Dad, but for the years with Diane I couldn't get back, for the stress and fear and doubt. Thomas found me there an hour later, red-eyed but calm. Found something? He asked gently. I handed him the letter. He read it, his jaw tightening. He knew, Thomas said. He was trying to protect you. He did protect me. He left me this letter. He made sure his real will was somewhere Diane couldn't find it. I stood, brushing dust off my jeans, and he left me you. Thomas smiled. Uncle Tom left us both each other. Family. The house sold for $950,000. With Dad's savings and the settlement from Diane's returned money, I inherited over $1 million. I donated to Dad's favorite charities, set up a scholarship at my old school in Mom's name, and put the rest in safe investments. I didn't need much. My townhouse was paid off, my pension covered my expenses. But I did one thing for myself. I hired Thomas's firm to create a foundation in Dad's name, helping elderly people who'd been victims of financial fraud. We called it the Robert Mitchell Truth Fund. Because the truth always comes out, I told Thomas at the launch party. Sometimes it just needs help. 6 months after the trial, I visited Diane in prison. I didn't have to, but I wanted to look her in the eye one more time. She looked different in orange. Smaller, older. The expensive highlights were growing out, showing gray roots. Why are you here? She asked, through the glass partition. I wanted you to know something, I said calmly. You thought I was weak, a pathetic old widow, easy to push around. You thought wrong. You got lucky, she spat. If that nephew of yours hadn't, it wasn't luck. It was family. Real family. The kind that fights for each other. I stood to leave. Enjoy the next 5 years, Diane. I'll be enjoying my father's house. Her face twisted with rage, but I was already walking away. I didn't look back. Today, I'm 63 years old. I volunteer at the library Dad loved, have Sunday dinners with Thomas and his wife, and sleep soundly knowing Dad's legacy is protected. Sometimes, late at night, I still take out that letter, read Dad's words, feel his love reaching across from wherever he is now. The truth always comes out, I whisper. Thanks for the help, Daddy. And I swear, In the quiet of my house, the house that's now truly mine, I can almost hear him whisper back, "That's my girl.